You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. The Sox have won a couple of series. Of their last 4 series, including the one that just ended against Cincinnati, they have taken 2 out of 3 times and got swept by the Royals. But I'm trying to find the positives, my friend.
Yeah, a nice little 3-game win streak that got busted up by Bryce Wilson being terrible and winning some series. I mean, it's
true.
A step in the right direction.
Right. It's a step in the right direction. I want to go through the lineups that Will Venable's been using lately. I've seen an evolution over the last couple of weeks. I think he's starting to really figure his team out. I want to get your take on it. Before we get into that, well, first of all, I want to mention our proud sponsors, Cork and Carry at the Park, 33rd in Princeton, right there on the corner. A award-winning burgers, an amazing menu, all kinds of fan favorites, indoor-outdoor seating. It's hot out now. Summer is upon us. It's going to be a great summer, and if you're going down to the area of the ballpark, you don't even need to go inside. Heck, they might not let you inside. If you listen to the last episode, we're going to touch on that in a moment. But even if they don't let you in there, it's okay. Just party over at the Cork. All right, check out everything they have going on at corkandcarry.com. All right, I do want to talk about the last episode because we got more response to that episode than we've gotten in a long time. And to recap for everybody, it started with me telling the story of my nephew, who is a teenager, high school teenager. He's a junior, going to be a senior next year, going down to the ballpark with his friends on a Saturday night to watch a ball game, something that a lot of you did. I did it when I was that age. Take some public transportation down and go see a ball game as a teenager. That's how you build a fan base, and he was denied entry in the 3rd inning. And I talked about how ridiculous that was, and whatever the reason is, because I didn't know the reason, whatever the reason is, there's no excuse for doing it. And
Correct.
Even after getting a good picture of what happened on Saturday night, I'm standing by that. We got so many emails. I had people call me who knew me. I had friends of mine who reached out and said, hey, my kid went down there with his friends. I know people from the north side, north suburbs, western suburbs, far south suburbs. You're here in the inner area, like right on the border of Chicago where we are in Evergreen Park. People in the city who live in there from all over there who had kids that were going down to that game. And why were they going down? The tickets are cheap. The team is bad. I mean, here's the attendance for the Chicago White Sox. This is a great way to lay a base for this discussion. No team has less attendance per game at this point than the Chicago White Sox in Major League Baseball, besides the Athletics, who are playing in a minor league stadium and don't have a town, and the Rays, who are playing in a minor league stadium. The White Sox are drawing 16,663 on average, as of right now as we sit here and talk, per game. That's the worst. Only getting beaten by 2 teams that are playing in minor league ballparks right now and can't fill it. So this is the best they can do. So that's the situation. So when you get a bunch of kids that are like, hey, you want to go to a game tonight? I mean, these kids have a million options, man. From the video games to the VR to we had less options when we were kids. You get kids want to go down and see a ball game, and they can afford it now because of how bad the team is, and they can sit anywhere they want to because we've opened up the stadium like it used to be in the good old days. They're going to want to go down there. I mean, I went down to that ballpark. One of my favorite games of all time was without parents at 13 years old, Ed. 13 years old, July the 1st, 1990, I watched Andy Hawkins throw a no-hitter and lose as the White Sox.
A classic White Sox game, as it turns out.
A classic White Sox game. It was bat day, no-hitter, Sox win, even though he threw 8 innings of no-hit baseball. It was amazing. I high-fived Hawk Harrelson twice. We were in the last row of seats behind home plate underneath the announcer's booth in the old stadium the last year of Old Comiskey Park. It is a memory I will keep forever. And I went down there on my own with 2 of my friends, because that's how it used to be back in the day. Right? I don't know if I'd let
you had more than one friend.
I don't know if I'd let my 13-year-old go down there by themselves, but I was down there. We bought tickets. We went in. We found seats. We did not have tickets for those seats. We found seats.
No, you didn't.
We snuck into those seats. In fact, I think I gave away my bat to a guy who knew that those weren't our seats. He's like, those aren't your seats. And I was like, do you want a bat?
Yeah, I'll take the bat. Keep the seats.
Do you want a bat? Because they were only giving them out to kids. The giveaway was for kids only.
Right, and you didn't need a ticket for the giveaway.
No, you didn't need a ticket for the giveaway, and kids were so welcome. They gave them the bats, not the adults. They trusted the children, the teenagers, with the bats back in the day. You're going to hear back in the day a lot. Just like I'm going to continue.
Children were our future back in the day.
just like I'm going to continue to refer to this as God's team, even though I don't understand what's going on with how God's team is treating its fans. But anyway, this is a time-honored tradition. And I want to read some of the comments. It's a time-honored tradition that White Sox fans fall in love with the team when they're young and go to the games a lot of times as children. So just a couple I just want to read a few of them. We got so much response, but a few of them stood out to me. This one's from Dan. He went to soxinthebasement.com, and Dan wrote, "Thank you for your pod episode about the gatekeeping at the park. I know from reading online that prohibiting teenagers who are there without a parent is also an issue. Some of my best childhood memories are being at the park with friends. I'm over Jerry. He continually does everything he can to make it hard on fans. Thank you also for mentioning the horrible traffic around the park. I can't drive down without spending 30 to 40 minutes trying to park after getting off at 33rd. And after you get off at 33rd, Court and Carry at the park's right there. You know, maybe just park. Yeah. Hang out there for a little while, and then go on inside. One of our other listeners, Mark, reached out about this same thing on Saturday, and he said, Chris and Ed, I really enjoy listening to your podcast. Last Saturday, my boss and his family went to the game after it started also. He paid to park, went to the ticket booth, bought tickets, but his family was not allowed in because he's got younger kids. Were they really denying, even with an adult? Is that what was going on?
With adult supervision, they were keeping kids out?
Right. Now, what they did for this guy, according to the letter, I don't want to read the whole thing, is that they refunded his money when he went to the booth. That's interesting because I have talked to many parents since this happened who have said that because they weren't there and their teenager went to the window and said they're denying me entry, they were not given their money back and the White Sox kept their money. An adult was there. They refunded the adults, but not the kids.
Because the adult says I'm gonna drag you out of that booth and give you the business. They believe it, but apparently, if a teenager does it, now I would believe the teenagers if they were to threaten me over the money more so than the adult because I'm an adult and I've got a bad back and a bad knee.
Now, Mike wrote us on our YouTube page. I'm not going to get to all these, and one more here about the fact he was actually at the game and he chatted with one of the ushers. He saw clear teenagers being served alcohol by the vendors. Now, I can't confirm this. That's hearsay. Okay, I wasn't there, but that's what he's claiming. He's saying there were a lot of teenagers that were at the game, and an usher finally told him that the White Sox had decided to shut things down because there were too many coming and it was some sort of a takeover, which is a funny thing. That's not the only person that used that. Look, this takeover language, it was a beautiful night and there were teenagers coming from all over the city. This isn't a coordinated attack. This is just all that wants to see your team right now because you're really bad. You should be thankful for it, okay? These are kids that are out there buying tickets and going to the game. Now, we had one guy who I am convinced, and he was on Twitter, and you don't know any background from people on Twitter. They can be anything they want to be. I'm convinced this guy is a security guard because he was really angry with me. Okay.
He's like the one maybe person he's working at the park.
Felt like
here.
He's throwing out like crazy stats. Like there were 100 teenagers trying to rush the gate and the police were outnumbered 10-1 and we had to shut it down. We're justified. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, no.
Keep in mind, you and I are hearing this. You're hearing this from a guy on Twitter. I don't know. Again, I'm an adult. I'm getting to be an old man. I watch the news every day.
I didn't see anything on this.
I didn't see anything about this.
There was no disturbance. I have Googled so many different phrases to try to find out if there was a disturbance that was over at the park on Saturday night. I can't find anything. Now, then again, this is the same team that when somebody had a gunshot wound inside of the ballpark, when you listen to the dispatch tapes, as a 10-year police dispatcher for the Cook County Sheriff's Police, I can tell that the call is not given out by the dispatchers to the cars, but rather somebody made a phone call to somebody else and they were trying to discreetly respond to the ballpark, which one delays response time. And what if it would have been a bigger incident than that? You're delaying response time to be discreet. I mean, in fact, that's the only main thing. That's terrible. And if that's how they deal with things.
This is somebody who's been shot.
Right. If that's how they deal with things, maybe there was a disturbance. Like, here's a theory. What if there was a disturbance? What if you had a large group of teenagers at one of the gates causing trouble? What if that actually happened? And what if security was outnumbered? I always think about what my father used to say. He was a Chicago police officer for 34 years and was a commander for, I want to say, the last decade downtown. Dealt with special events in large crowds. You know what he used to say to me? He used to laugh about it. We're the biggest gang in the city, but we have radios and helicopters too. They're never outnumbered. No. You're in the heart of the city of Chicago. The Chicago Police Department is one of the best trained police departments in the world. Make a call if you're having a disturbance and make arrest. Teenagers will disperse when all the blue lights start pulling into the parking lot. So that's why I don't buy the story. And if you can't handle rowdy teenagers at a gate to the point where you need to shut down access to the ballpark to your fan base, the vast majority have nothing to do with this one group causing trouble. If that's your only response, I have to question my own safety at your ballpark, because if you can't handle that, how are you going to handle a real threat at a public stadium in a post 9/11 world? This is all you can handle? You can't. The moment some teenagers get loud, we're shutting it down on a Saturday night? Again, I wasn't there, but I'm getting
remember.
Go ahead.
Does Jerry not remember the ballpark that he inherited? I mean, the late 70s, before Jerry Reinsdorf became the owner, Comiskey Park, from what I'm told, was not the most savory place in the city of Chicago to spend a Saturday night. You know, it was fun. It was a great time, but it wasn't exactly for the faint of heart. And look, you know, you get back to, all right, so a group of kids walks up, ticket holders, and you can make playing devil's advocate, you can make the case that, all right, we're not going to let any unaccompanied minors in for the rest of this game because we're not sure what the plan was here. But when a family shows up with accompanied minors,
that's really weird.
Okay, then now you're just being dumb.
And you have to refund. They're still paying customers, and I don't get the shutdown for every teenager because there's problems. Okay, because I've never heard of problems over at Ozinga Field and Crestwood. Somehow they're able to handle teenagers. Is the rate the only ballpark that gets teenagers that show up? You've never had a group of teenagers show up at Wrigley Field?
I mean, right, yeah, a group of teenagers going to a Cubs game to cause problems. That doesn't happen.
Here's the thing. I fall back on what I said earlier about the Chicago Police Department. And as somebody who worked in a police department, even as a civilian, but as a 911 dispatcher and later a dispatch supervisor for Cook County Sheriff's Police, I got trained side by side with the police in all kinds of different things, all kinds of different scenarios. They would send us to the same training things as they wanted us to learn. The police are better trained now than they've ever been. They know exactly how to handle situations, how to de-escalate, how to deal with all age groups and all different walks of life. Yes, there's some bad apples and bad things happen, and that's all you ever see. But trust me, they're better at it now than they've ever been. So the idea that you couldn't handle teenagers at a gate and your knee-jerk reaction was to shut down your ballpark, questions need to be answered about that. And whoever made that decision really shouldn't be making decisions over there again. And my thing is this: if you're overwhelmed by teenagers on a Saturday night at a Major League Baseball stadium, you don't have enough staff, or you're not training them right, or you have the wrong people in charge, or you have bad decision makers, but you definitely do not have a safe ballpark. And that's how I see this. Because if you were a safe ballpark, you'd know how to handle that situation. Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales, not in your kitchen. You're in their showroom. Full examples, glass designs on display. No pictures in a book. See it in person with an owner in showroom and then one on site to answer all of your questions and make sure it gets done right. They've been doing it that way for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands, custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest is located a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. I don't want to stay on this forever, but I did want to follow up on it because here's the thing. First of all, vast majority of the response that we got, over 95% of it, has been, that's ridiculous. How do you shut things down? How do you lock out a group of people because some of that group was acting up, and why are you not equipped to be able to handle it? And the argument of we just didn't know what else to do, so we just kind of stopped everything. That tells me that not only did you cut payroll, but it goes back to the parking issue, right? You're drawing 16,000 fans, and people are still complaining about parking because you're too cheap to have the proper amount of staff. So are you also too cheap to have the proper amount of security? Because there's no way anything gets out of hand. How are you not? The White Sox should be like arms open for the idea that anybody of any age would want to show up at their ballpark and walk inside.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I'm the White Sox, I'm not in a position to give into any kind of profiling or sit there and gatekeep or do anything. Okay. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to provide the ballpark as a safe place to go. All right. So if you're worried about teenage takeovers of Michigan Avenue and stuff like that.
Stupid. It was not. That's not what this was. This was a beautiful night.
Definitely not what it was.
All over the city, kids of all walks of life showing up, and the vast majority of them just happy to be at a ball game and enjoying a night out. And you get a couple of bad apples, and then you shut the thing down. Then you deny refunds for those that don't have parents with them.
Well, and let's assume
you made a ton of Cub fans. You made a ton of Cub fans on Saturday night.
Oh, yes, you did. And you're assuming, Chris, by your language, that there was a legitimate disturbance where there was some actual threats to property or physical well-being.
And all I have is one Twitter guy saying it. One guy on Twitter. That's it. That's all I found.
And we're not talking about, teenage exuberance, all right?
Right.
Kids that are just happy to be out and doing stuff because, I don't know, When I was young and actually had energy, I would talk loud. I would laugh loud. I would goof around. I couldn't stand still.
Listen, in the 1990s, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, you don't think there were guys that would go to a ballpark and try to sneak in beer? You don't think there were kids? You don't think there were kids who were able to get beer at the ballpark? Because I did.
You're just talking about beer.
I got beer at the ballpark. Okay. You don't think that there were rowdy kids that when they were just sort of trying to like act out, knocked over a garbage can at the rate, or what it was called back then, Comiskey Park. You don't think there was rowdiness that occurred? You know what the difference is? Security dealt with it. They didn't kick out all the kids. They just dealt with the issue. And that's what my problem with the whole thing is. And that's, I want to put a bow on it because I want to get back to the team. But that's what my problem with what happened on Saturday night is. My problem is if your security force is well trained, if you have plans in place as you should in the modern era for a stadium on a Saturday night, if you're staffed properly, you don't need to lock down the stadium because of some rowdy kids at a gate.
And what happens if they were rowdy adults? How are you going to lock it down then?
I don't know. I don't know what you do there because they don't seem if they couldn't handle teenagers.
Yeah, and you can't tell me that there's not drunken rowdy adults.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
That ballpark. I mean, I know for a fact. I've had a beer thrown at me by several of them.
I've seen it too. I watch people get drenched. That's the thing. If you're having problems at your ballpark, you save millions upon millions and millions of dollars on fielding this horrible team that's showing a little bit of life, so it's kind of fun to watch. I don't know. Spend a couple $100,000 on a few extra security guards. That's all I'm saying.
Jacob Amaya's sitting on the bench. Have him go and patrol the ballpark.
Get him a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, come on.
Get him out there. All right, let's talk about the lineups that I've seen Will Venable use. They just came out of this series with Cincinnati. They take 2 out of 3. They lose the getaway day on Thursday afternoon. Bryce Wilson's terrible. But Jonathan Cannon and Davis Martin do enough, and the batting order does enough. And what I found interesting, both of those days, you always expect on the day after a day game after a night game, guys are going to need days off. It's not going to be the same lineup. But the first 2 games of that series, Meidroth hits 1, Vargas hits 2, Caro hits 3, Robert Jr. hits 4. Then he throws Vaughn, Sosa, and Elko in there. And the only difference, because he puts Michael Taylor down in the 9th spot, is Brooks Baldwin bats 8th in game 2, and Rojas bats 8th in game 1. Both played left field. But he went with a very set lineup, and I'm really interested in the top of that order. Meidroth's an on-base guy. Vargas over the last 15 days has been getting on at over, I think, a 320 clip, his on-base percentage.
He's been walking more and striking out and getting on, yeah.
Edgar Caro's been a big on-base guy, and he's had a high on-base percentage, and I mean, first of all, he's playing out of his mind. He made another great throw down to third base and got a base runner. He's got a cannon for an arm. How do you can't get him out of the lineup, okay? And Robert Jr. has been contributing. I found it interesting, though, that he dropped him down to the 4 spot for those 2 days, because there was a time where he was kind of moving him up towards the top of the order, especially with the speed. And I think what he's trying to do, and tell me if I'm crazy here, I think what he's trying to do is I think that Will Venable recognizes that Meidroth is an on-base guy and Caro is a middle of the lineup guy, and it doesn't matter how long you've been there or whatever. These 2 rookies, they belong up there at the top. Vargas is hot, and we're going to reward the fact that he's using his eye and getting on base and taking pitches, and we're going to put him in the 2 spot. And then what we have left, we have to just look at the rest of the team and say, okay, well, what's the next best player? And he trusts Robert Jr. more than he trusts Andrew Vaughn. And that's how I see the lineup. And as I look at the games leading up to that, he had played Vaughn in the 3 or 4 spot for multiple days leading up to that. And it was almost like there's been a switch, and he had a very different top of the order. And then the 2 days in Cincinnati, you see some real consistency there. And I think we have a manager who's starting to figure out his team.
Well, and he's starting to get guys to perform on a consistent basis too, which helps. But I think Robert in the 4 spot makes sense for Luis Robert Jr. because what you're doing is you're even though he behind him in the lineup is troublesome to say the least in terms of Robert having protection. If you've got Mydroth and Vargas and Caro routinely getting on base, okay, even if all 3 of them don't get on in front of him to start the first inning, even if 1 or 2 of them are on and there's pressure on the pitcher, you can't really afford to give Luis Robert Jr. a free base. You can't pitch around him to get to Vaughn because there's still enough behind the lineup that somebody putting a ball in play is going to cost you a run or 2. And when Luis Robert Jr. gets on base, he makes things happen with his legs too. So if he is, if you got Chase Mydroth on second, and even if you've got 2 outs, that if you put Luis Robert Jr. on, he is going to be a problem going from first to third or first to home should Vaughn run into one. And you have to at least respect the fact that Vaughn can still kind of run into one. So what you're doing there is you're really just saying, okay, let me put him in RBI situations. And then when he's not in an RBI situation, he can still get on and he can still cause trouble for the pitchers.
Don't you worry, though, about the lack of protection? I mean, I still don't feel like Andrew Vaughn is enough of a bat that he protects Luis Robert Jr. We've talked about this.
Nobody is, though.
Well,
nobody in the lineup really is.
Well, I guess you're right. Nobody is. And as soon as I said it, I started to argue with myself in my brain.
Right, because what are you going to say?
Because what I remembered that one of the points that we've made, and I still believe to be true, is that Luis Robert Jr. is not a star. He's a guy who needs everybody else around him playing well, and he would put far less pressure on himself if he was hitting behind guys who are producing, rather than have to be the guy to get things going. So maybe it does make sense to have him lower down.
Yeah, and he is a dangerous hitter in those scenarios because now all he has to do too is he doesn't have to hit the home run every time, right? He doesn't have to worry about being on base, getting a double, getting himself into scoring position. If you've got guys in scoring position in front of you, you put the ball in play and see what happens. So if he ends up on first base in a first and third situation, even with Vaughn up, he can go and run and steal second base and try and force something to happen, right? So it's a lot less pressure on him mentally than sitting there worrying about setting up Andrew Vaughn to fail or setting up somebody else to fail. And the problem is that when you look, for example, I'm just looking at the game that they won 4-2, the Davis Martin game, in the lineup behind him, you really only have Lenyn Sosa who's hitting 272 with a 672 OPS. Lenyn Sosa is not really a power threat at this point. He's got a better batting average than most of the team, but between Vaughn, Elko is a rookie that, he ran into one and he had a base hit in that game. Brooks Baldwin has fallen off. Michael Taylor doesn't scare anybody, and he shouldn't at this point in his career. There is no Andrew Benintendi behind to sit there behind him. And I think when Benintendi comes back,
you got to put him. Yeah, I would put him fifth and drop Vaughn down to sixth.
You've got him fifth, Vaughn sixth.
And what's interesting
now
is that
Robert's really protected.
You have Caro. Think about the top of that order. It's so in contrast with some of the modern thinking in Major League Baseball, but it's kind of the cards that Venable's been dealt, right? Like a lot of the thinking when we were younger was that your best hitter is sitting 3 and your second best hitter is sitting 4, right? Like that was how you did things. You put the speed guy up in front.
Especially the power guys.
Right. That's what you would do. And now a lot of thinking is, well, your guy in a 2 spot actually sometimes should be your best all-around hitter. And we made that argument before looking at the modern lineups on previous shows. What's interesting about the lineup that is currently been employed the last couple of, like in this last series, which I think made a lot of sense, was that he went for getting on base. I mean, like he put an emphasis on Mydroth hasn't hit a home run, and he's sitting up at the top of the order. Vargas has 3, It's not a lot. And he's only recently been hot, and he's sitting in the 2 spot. Carroll has no home runs yet. And he's in the 3 spot. He's in the Frank Thomas spot of your order. And yet it makes sense to me because of what he has to use. He doesn't have a fully developed team. He doesn't have enough of a team with enough talent on it to go with what you would think is either a traditional lineup or the more modern way of setting up your lineup. So instead what he's doing is we're going to get on base. We're going to be at least some sort of a problem for the pitcher. We're going to give ourselves the best opportunity to maybe somebody gets a base knock and scores a run because that's the best we can do.
That run of 4 players, okay, is your best chance to string together 3 to 4 base hits.
Yeah, and then maybe Robert gets a hold of one.
And maybe Robert gets a hold of one. But stringing together 3 to 4 base hits and getting a couple of runs out of that, hopefully, is your best way to put up 4 runs in that game. Right, and win 4-2 and give Mike Vassell an opportunity to serve as your new closer and get a try out there. So I like the fact that he's experimenting and he's working with, okay, what can I do to put something together that'll work? And it's not going to work every day because, like we said, you get to the final game of that Cincinnati series and Bryce Wilson just absolutely coughs it up. They end up losing 7-1, and there's just at that point there's nothing you can do. And even in that one, he's going with Miguel Vargas as the hot hitter. He's going with him at the top of the lineup, putting professional Josh Rojas behind him, but Luis Roberts back in the 3rd position with Tim Elko trying to back him up. And you sit there and you go, okay, well,
he gave Meidroth a day off. So that's just it. So now he tries to readjust everything. He gave Meidroth a day off, and he gave Carroll a day off because you can't have your catcher catch every day. He lets Carroll catch the first.
Which, interestingly, I would have put Matt Thies up at the top of the lineup then.
Yeah, I can see the argument for that, especially the way he's been producing at the plate. But another thing, and we're just looking at one series here. You go back, you see that in the series before that, they win 2 out of 3 against the Marlins, and they use a different lineup, and then they do have Carroll hitting up towards the top when they're getting swept by the Royals. So you could tell he's still trying to figure it out. But I would look at just this tiny microcosm of this last series, and I would say what I like, first of all, is I like the idea of we're going to get on base. We're going to take some pressure off of Robert Jr. and not make him feel like he needs to be the star, because he's not. He's just a really good player that in the right situation with the right team around him plays at a very, very high level. But when he doesn't have the right team around him, plays at he's hitting under 200 still. It's not good, okay? And understanding that after that, you really don't have very much. You have a replacement level Andrew Vaughn and a bunch of guys, right? Maybe Tim Elko comes and figures it out here now from AAA. He's getting an opportunity, but you just got a bunch of guys after that, right? So what the idea is get on base, give an opportunity for guys like Caro and Robert Jr. to knock guys in and try to manufacture a couple of runs. It's a smart way to put a lineup together. The problem is, you can't use Caro all the time because he's not going to catch all the time. And every once in a while, somebody else is going to need a day off. So what's really interesting is he goes, I'm going with my best lineup the first 2 games because I know when I get to game 3, I'm going to have to rest people. So instead of giving Meidroth game 2 off and Caro game 3 off, he made sure he had his Meidroth, Vargas, Caro, Robert Jr. for at least 2 games. Understanding that the third one is like, it's Bryce Wilson, we're probably going to lose anyway. Suddenly at the end of the show, we got to get to the Sox Nerd before we get out of here. Dave Merritt puts all those tidbits and trivia nuggets up on the scoreboard at the rate, and he joins us each and every week on Sox in the Basement. Brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for us?
Because of the excitement, intensity, and attention it garners, Sox-Cub games are my favorites of the season. With Chicago's teams renewing their rivalry on the north side, here are some nuggets on the series. The Sox enter the weekend 74-72 all-time in interleague play against the Cubs. The Sox have to win 2 games to emerge from 2025 even against the Cubs. 3 wins will enable the Sox to maintain their lead in the series, which they've held since a 6-0 win on June 28, 2009, gave them a 36-35 lead in the showdown. The heroes that day were John Danks, who threw 7 scoreless innings, and the underrated Alexei Ramirez, who was 3 for 5 with a 3-run homer. By the way, the starting second baseman that day, Chris Getz, chipped in 2 hits and scored in the rout. Keep an eye on Lenyn Sosa this weekend. The infielder entered the weekend with a .455 average against the Cubs, which is second in Sox history to Moises Sierra's .462 among those players with at least 10 at-bats against the Northsiders. Sierra is one of many obscure Sox who has thrived against the Cubs. Would you believe the Sox top 8 hitters against the Cubs, regardless of at-bats, are Toby Hall, Ryan Lamar, Dominic Fletcher, Nicky Lopez, Charlie O'Brien, Giovanni Soto, and the Wells boys, Kip and Casper. It's a shame Andrew Benintendi isn't active for this series. The injured Benny has slashed a robust .526, .545, and .947 with a homer and 5 RBIs in 5 games at Wrigley Field. Among players with at least 19 at-bats at 1060 West Addison, Benintendi's slugging percentage is first all-time, his average is second, and his on-base percentage is 7th. You want to win a few bets? Charlie O'Brien hit the Sox' first interleague home run at Wrigley Field on June 6, 1998. Mike Olt is the only player to homer for both teams in the same season. He did that in 2015. No player has represented both the Cubs and the Sox in an All-Star game. The first player to appear in the postseason for both franchises was Vance Law, who was a member of the 1983 Sox and the 1989 Cubs. Bill Buckner was the Sox hitting coach in 1997 and 1998, and the player the Sox dealt to the Cubs to get John Garland in 1998 was relief pitcher Matt Karchner. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger? In honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. Frank Thomas hit a whopping 105 first-inning home runs for the White Sox. The last of those blasts came against the Cubs. On June 24, 2005, Thomas's solo shot in the first off Sergio Mitre keyed the Sox 12-2 victory over the Cubs before 39,000 plus on the south side. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about Getz, Benny, Danks, and Mike Olt.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.